Welcome to the Leadership in Law podcast with host Marilyn Jenkins. Cut through the noise, get actionable insights and inspiring stories delivered straight to your ears. Your ultimate podcast for navigating the ever-changing world of law firm ownership. In each episode, we dive deep into the critical topics that matter most to you, from unlocking explosive growth to building a thriving team. We connect you with successful firm leaders and industry experts who share their proven strategies and hard-won wisdom. So, whether you're a seasoned leader or just starting your journey as a law firm owner, the Leadership in Law podcast is here to equip you with the knowledge and tools you need to build a successful and fulfilling legal practice.
Welcome to another episode of the Leadership in Law podcast. I'm your host, Marilyn Jenkins. Please join me in welcoming my guest, RJ Schultz, to the show today. RJ is the COO of Blip, an advertising technology company that enables marketers to run digital billboard ads as easy as online ads. He previously worked at Amazon, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and the Pentagon. He holds an MBA from Duke, go Blue Devils, and he loves showing people how accessible billboard advertising can be on any budget, like a billboard ad at Times Square for less than $50, and how it's a great supplement to online advertising efforts. I'm excited to have you here, RJ. Welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. So tell us a bit about, that's a pretty impressive resume there. How'd you get started and ended up where you are?
I mean, I followed a similar path to my father and joined the government right out of college. And I had a pretty unique but interesting catalyst for how I left the government and got into business. I traveled a lot at that time and had like a 2.5-year-old son. And I was home once and we were playing on the floor with cars and trucks. And he's like, "Dad, this is fun." And I'm like, "Yeah, buddy, this is so fun." And he's like, "Next time, I want to do it at your house." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, he doesn't even think I live here." And so that was like my wake-up call.
Wow.
That same year that I decided to leave that line of work and go figure out what was next. And we lived very close to Duke University, and I started to research about business and things like that. And I thought, oh, this is a good next step. And so that's where it was born. And it was a wild ride from then. Happy to answer any deeper questions on that or everything else, but that's where it started.
Well, that is definitely a wake-up call. Interesting. So yes, so let's talk about the Blip advertising and buying billboards. Now I've known different iterations of it. Explain how your program works and your process works.
Yeah, ours is unique because it places control of where, when, and how much in the hands of the user, right? Traditionally, out-of-home advertising, which is basically billboards, mainly billboards rather. Traditionally, it's been done through agencies and it costs a lot of money and it requires contracts and committed time that a lot of us SMBs just can't do, right? We don't have a year's worth of planning. We don't have $1 million we can commit to this. And so that's why Blip was born. And so with Blip, you're able to go on to the website, think of like a Google Maps type interface. You can zoom in or scroll into the geography you're looking at. We'll have the signs in our network populated on the map. You can hover over them and see what they look like. If they're north or south facing or left or right side of the freeway. You can see per GeoPath, which is the data company we partner with, how many cars drive by it every day. And based on those parameters, you can say like, okay, I want to include this region or these signs in my campaign. I don't want to spend more than, say $100 a day or whatever it is. You set that limit and then you upload your ad and we facilitate sending it to those signs for your desired period. And so it's most easily understood using Uber as a proxy because we're all familiar with Uber, right? You they are a piece of technology. They sit between car owners and car riders, but Uber does not own cars and they do not ride cars, right? They just connect the two through an open exchange. And we're very much the same. We sit between sign owners and people who want to advertise, mostly SMBs, small, medium-sized businesses. And we don't own signs and we don't advertise, but we just connect the two through an open exchange. And so just like you can go to Uber to pay $15 for a ride home from the airport, you can come to Blip to put your ad on 1 or 20 signs in Times Square or LA or wherever you want, just for a set amount of time without going under contract. And so it's pretty much the Uber or Airbnb model for out-of-home advertising.
Interesting. And do you cover all of the US or your major metropolitan areas? Where do we have the option?
Yes, there are 3,700-ish, maybe 38 now, 4,000 signs across the US, coast to coast, and you can access them all right through our platform. We also have another line of business that, I'll mention now, but it's called AdCom, and it's our national service. It has access to upwards of 20, 30,000 static boards in addition to those 4,000 digitals. And so in the US, you can get your ad.
Now, I would have to come up with the ad myself, or do you have teams that can help with that? How does that work if I'm not quite, I need help?
Yeah, either or. So you can be completely self-serve. And so some companies have teams that create their ads and they just upload them right on the platform, and then they get sent to the signer for approval. And we never interact on that. Or a team inside the platform can say like, hey, I'm at this artwork step or this creative step. I'd like some help. And so we can step into varying degrees and help the advertiser come up with something.
Okay, so obviously it's going to be like moving video, but not audio, right?
Clearly. For the ads,
Yeah.
it just still pictures, no video.
Okay. All right. So I wasn't sure if these would be something like also in like there's like municipals that have TVs and stuff that you put local ads on. So it's not that.
Correct. It is not that. It is sending your static ads, your image ads to billboards. The most quintessential ad, like I'll mention it, and then all of you listeners at home or in the car, wherever you are, you'll think of exactly what they put on their billboards. But the quintessential campaign is from Chick-fil-A.
Yes.
And you can imagine being on the road, and what do they say? Eat more chicken in various ways. But like that's what we do, billboard advertising.
I love that. Okay, great. And I know that you have the specifics too. Whenever if I want to choose which side of the freeway to be on, or that sort of thing, which will work great for obviously some attorneys do this, but statewide attorneys, but then local attorneys within your city. Okay.
Yeah. One of the most interesting use cases, and attorneys could do something similar, right? And the way that fits their world, but we have a lot of recording artists, like in the rap genre, that will buy up boards or rent boards, reserve boards rather, in the cities in which they will be performing. And so they'll just go ahead of their tour, like a month, just say like, hey, I'm coming. Very, very targeted, very specific. And it's like, we never planned on stuff like that, but it's fun to watch people utilize the platform in ways that work for them. And I'm sure that attorneys can find a similar way.
Absolutely, especially if there's a change in the law or something that's important. I love that idea because we see posters that go up, obviously in metropolitan areas when an artist is coming, but the billboards is a perfect way, and you just allow the user to be able to do that.
Yeah. Billboards, I mean, they're the least sexy form of advertising, the oldest form of advertising. And any of us who went to school in the last 30 years to study business or marketing never talked about billboards at all.
No, but it's the lack of tracking and that sort of thing is why, it's
but lack of tracking, and we're addressing that. Maybe we can chat about that a little bit during the course of this episode. But I mean, they're still around because they're effective and they're cost effective, right? Like they have their place. They're definitely not meant to replace what you're doing on Facebook. They're meant to augment what you're doing on Facebook, because when you think about the customer journey going from unaware to ready to make a purchase decision, like billboards is not, no one medium of advertising is going to cover that well. Billboards definitely have their place, like any other form of advertising does, along that journey.
And that's what I was going to roll into next. So when we talk about the buyer's pyramid, obviously Facebook, you've got the top two spots are going to be Google PPC, where people are ready to make a decision. They're looking for a solution, but it's the bottom of the pyramid that we usually go to Facebook. And it sounds like the billboards are going to be helping us with the bottom of the pyramid, getting that awareness and that brand recognition.
Correct. Yeah. One of my favorite studies, and this comes from OAAA, so OAAA.org. It's like the Out of Home Advertising Association of America.org. They have, a plethora of case studies, and they're organized by industry. They're organized further by goal, like if it's foot traffic or awareness or whatever it is. And so you probably have something for legal services on there. You can go in and click in to see how people have utilized billboards and to what end and how effective. Well, one of my favorite case studies that illustrate the point you brought up comes from McDonald's. And this is to show how billboards have their place at that awareness stage in the funnel and make everything beneath it all the more effective. So McDonald's, in this case study, launched a menu item in 5 cities. These were DMAs like Oklahoma City, Dallas, Houston, like that. And in in all 5 cities, they ran 6 weeks of Facebook advertising before launch. So pre-launch. And then in 4 of those 5 cities, they layered billboards on top of the Facebook. And after their test time, the 4 cities outperformed the control city by an average of 729% in revenue and sales.
Wow.
And that's what's so extremely fascinating to me, is the effect that proper, or what we call smart marketing, can have on itself when it is put together in a full funnel strategy. And, coming from, working with people at the Pentagon in that background, I'm very interested in the psychology of like, why did that become so effective for people who are looking for something at McDonald's? Like, why did that have a 729% influence, like uptick in influence on these folks? And what it comes down to is the psychology of survival, and that's super interesting to me, right? When you are served an ad on your phone and you're playing chess or scrolling social media, or you're on the toilet or whatever you're doing on your phone, you're not in shop mode. And so that ad comes, maybe you look at it, maybe you don't, but really you're trying to get it swiped away as quickly as possible so you can go back to what you were doing. And that's normal. That's natural. When you're confronted by an ad in the sky on a billboard for 8 seconds, like that's forever. And that's only 2 seconds right there, right? But you're forced to psychologically ingest things like colors, logos, maybe a couple of words, so that the next time you're playing chess or scrolling social media or whatever, next time that surfaces on your device, psychology of survival at the subconscious level says, hey, Marilyn, we've seen this color or this logo or this word before. Do we need to dwell an extra second to see if it's a benefit or a threat? And the answer is like automatically yes. And that's the reason that the efficacy is so great when you layer awareness on top of that point of sale, like, call to action, make a decision type marketing. And that's the big message of smart marketing. And it's the most fun thing to play around with trying to help consumers find their solutions,
That is incredible. I mean,
That's
I can see,
fascinating.
yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. And so that's your smart marketing. I love that. So you're saying, so we look at it on comparing it to and layering it with Meta. Now, where does the Google 7-11-4 rule come in, and how does that play into your system?
So Google 7-11-4 is an evolved form of what most of us are probably familiar with, although I can't, you probably can't either pinpoint where you heard this. We just grew up thinking it, that people need to see you 7 times before they to buy, right? Somehow that's, occupying.
I think that was from the 70s, Ogilvy advertising or something.
Okay, yeah, maybe. That might be a fun initiative to go find the origin of that. But Google 7-11-4 is like, their studies indicate that 7 hours of content need to be consumed over, I'm going to get this incorrect, over 11 different meaningful touch points. And those touch points need to be had over 4 different mediums, 4 different channels. So same concept, just drilled down a little bit further with some scientific backing from Google's research team. And that's an important thing to understand on the outset, because at the thesis layer, what that says is, hey, I'm not going to convert someone on the first time I throw an ad up there. I need to be really judicious about how I reach out and where I reach out and when I reach out. And so that's what really gave birth to the concept of what we call smart marketing. And smart marketing is really, in a nutshell, just understanding. Let's go back to that, 7 touch points. We'll use that framework for ease of conversation here. Just understanding that people need to have 7 meaningful touch points with you, or a number of meaningful touch points with you. And so smart marketing says, how can I most effectively bring someone from unaware to ready to buy? How can I develop them along that path in the most cost-effective way? A lot of people, especially franchisees that we work with, who are new to business ownership and limited because of the newness, because of being novice in the space, limited in their understanding or knowledge of how to use tools, or even what tools are out there. A lot of them will go and say, all right, I'm spending on Facebook. That's just part of my cost of owning this business. But what they're doing is spending, in some cases, a $14 to $18 CPM on Facebook ads from the beginning. And so they're trying to pay for getting, a critical mass of people in your geography to see you 7 times, paying $14 to $18, per 1,000 impressions. And that's just not cost effective. Facebook has answered that plight that we have by saying, okay, well, you can dial down the CPM by removing the targeting parameters. And if you just want an awareness campaign, you can do that with Facebook, and it's $4 a CPM. And that's great. That's the right direction. However, with Facebook, you don't know how many of those impressions are being served to bot accounts. Right. So when you get your feedback, your reporting saying, hey, your ad was shown this many times, it's like, well, how many of those are humans? I need to know that. You know what I mean?
Well, and you'll never get that number.
Yeah, and you don't know, right? So that's still unsolved. But Facebook absolutely has its place. I guess we should start saying Meta. We usually removed from the change.
Yeah, but we all still say Facebook and Instagram, right?
Meta absolutely has its place. And I'll describe what that might look like in a smart marketing campaign, right? Knowing you've got to develop an audience to becoming qualified buyers.
Right.
How do we do this most cost effectively? You think of the first 1, 2, 3 impressions with something like out of home, like billboards, because billboards are authoritative. They they come to human eyes. Bots don't go see billboards, right? So when you get impression data from Geopath, you know that those are eyes in an actual car, humans seeing this. So it's authoritative and it's cost effective, $4 or $5 a CPM. So you think about the buyer journey having those 7 steps 1, 2, and 3. We're going to really use billboards for that. When you think about step 3 and then 4 and then 5, maybe 6, what can we layer underneath billboards, a la McDonald's, to start making those touch points more personal and more connection oriented? Well, let's start layering in our own socials, our company socials, or the content we're producing organically, or some type of paid search or something like that. Some of the normal, quote unquote, normal forms of digital advertising that we know, 3, 4, 5, layered underneath billboards. And then when we know that people in the area have seen it 6 times on average, now we should feel okay spending $18 a CPM to deliver a Facebook ad, because we're, to a degree confident that that ad is being served to someone who's already had all those meaningful touch points and is likely ready to buy. And so that's the concept of smart marketing. Like, just think about your marketing spend, your strategy, your approach in terms of where your customers are along that journey of being unaware to at some, qualified or ready to buy, and divide up the things that you invest in accordingly. And you'll save a lot of money and you'll see a lot of growth, right?
Mm-hmm. And you're doing it like, are you speaking like retargeting? I mean, obviously with the billboards, you can't, but as soon as they get to the point where they're interacting with your assets and, they're now aware, the brand aware, now we can retarget with more and different messaging that's more personal.
I mean, absolutely. You're dead on. And I love the way you said that, because you said with billboards, you can't. And, someone else said that to us in a conversation just like this, maybe 9 or 10 months ago. And then we went back to the drawing board and we're like, well, why can't we? Can we retarget with billboards? And so here we go. Yeah. Here's the offer that we usually give to folks. It costs more than simply advertising on billboards, but this is indicative of like the suite of offerings that someone can get with Blip. So we have gotten to a point where we can retarget in the following manner. So you come to Blip, and say you're in Salt Lake City. That's where we're based, right? And you buy 1 million impressions at a $4 or $5 CPM. You can buy the same impressions on the same billboards. Remember, we don't own billboards. We're using other people's boards like Uber. You can buy the same impressions on the same boards for the same price in Salt Lake City. And say you want 1 million impressions, you pay for that. Well, at any other company, they will say, oh, here's a proof of that play, whether it's a digital render or it's a picture or it's our system saying, yes, it played. Here's the proof that we did what you paid us for. Have a nice day. We'll see you next time that you need out-of-home advertising. And we've gone 2 steps beyond that to get to targeting. So instead of going into a relationship like that, you can come to us and get that same 1 million impressions. And the second thing we'll do beyond that is tell you what's going on with those impressions. For example, you bought 1 million impressions. It's in Salt Lake. That's not 1 million people. It is, say, 272,000 people between the city of Draper and Salt Lake proper. And of those 272,000 people, 10,000 of them have seen it once, 18,000 have seen it twice, 43,000 have seen it 3 times, and 4 and 5, and so on and so forth. And so we generate this bell curve, this graph to show you, along the bottom, here are the number of impressions, and along the y-axis, here are the actual like, swaths of people who fit into that category. And so when you're looking at this bell curve, you could say like, oh, over the last 90 days, our spend has gotten us to a point where 75% of the population has seen us at least 5 times. We're getting saturated here. This is great. So first thing, buy the impressions. Second thing we offer is we'll give you what's going on in the impressions with some statistical data. And then the third thing is we'll help you retarget those. And the way we do that is by geofencing either our board that you're using or your store location or your office location, whichever you choose. And when a vehicle will pass through that geofence, we can collect the device ID and put that into a list and then hand it to you and say like, hey, remember you bought those 1 million impressions, and remember how 75% of the 272,000 people have seen you 5 times at least, on statistically speaking. Well, here is a list of all the device IDs that are driving past your store, and 75% of them, like in theory, have seen you 5 times. So hand this to your marketing department or your DSP or us through partners. We can do that as well. Let's start retargeting these same folks with either similar ads or the exact same ones they've seen on the billboard right to their mobile device. So we are trying to build a world in which it is obvious that you can retarget with billboard advertising. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Absolutely. I was intrigued as well. So you can capture the mobile ID of the people that are driving by the sign at the specific time that my ad is showing. So now I have a database. I can build that custom audience and give them new ads that are more personal to them. Okay, great.
Yeah, with 2 caveats, since I'm speaking to law folks, got to be clear. Yeah. We can't know if they're driving by at the exact second your ad is playing, but we do know that they're driving by during the time which you have put into the system that you want your ad to be rotating. Okay. So it's not like, hey, they drove by in March and you start advertising in June. It's no, your campaign is running from June to October. This person is driven by 5 times in that same period of time. We can do that. And then it's not Blip yet that is collecting those device IDs. We do that through a partner.
Okay. Well, that's very exciting. And just because as you know, I mean, it's always been the thought that, you could throw a billboard up, but how are you going to, retarget? And I love that you have the opportunity to do that, because you can get exposure, but if we can't reach back out and give them a better ad and move them along that buyer's pyramid, that's a great concept. It sounds like a really interesting program you have there. And how does this play into the Times Square for $50?
So Times Square is a board owned by a board owner, just like a board in Salt Lake City or Atlanta or wherever. And anywhere else outside of Times Square, we have just a simple, second bid auction. If you want to have your ad play during rush hour traffic, there are going to be a couple more people who want that time as well. And your payment, the cost of it might increase a little bit. Mm-hmm. Times Square runs a little bit differently, since all times are prime times in Times Square because there's always people going through there. The board owners will just set those prices for us and say, we require at least this much spend. We have no control over that. So that's how we say Times Square for $50. But I'll ask you, I'll put you on the spot here. And I'm sure that your listeners are asking the same question, like how much does it cost outside of Times Square? So where are you located, Marilyn?
Houston. Although Houston. I was involved in a company that we did an ad in Times Square. So I'm interested where you go. Yeah. So go ahead.
They're in Houston, either where the Astros play or somewhere on the freeway. How much do you think people are paying today in Houston for having an ad play for 8 seconds in one of those locations? Freeway, Astro Stadium.
I would think the stadium would be more expensive, but I wouldn't have a concept. No.
They asked me this when I was like investigating the company or the idea back when I was really young, and I was like, $50,000. Okay, $10,000. And they're like, okay, that's a good guess. 5 cents. 5 cents. 3 to 5 cents on average in those types of DMAs per blip, per flip, per 8 seconds. Obviously, a campaign is you want tons of flips, and so you're not only paying 5 cents, but the economics of it are really interesting to know. You don't need to come pay $1 million to make something happen in a place like Houston. In a place like Houston, at 3 to 5 cents a flip, it's a good idea. Man, I hesitate to just give blanket recommendations because we need to put this into our tool and figure out how many people live there and what their patterns are. But on average, somewhere like that is like $3,000 to $5,000 a month for 3 months to get that 75% critical mass that have seen you, 5
When you
times.
say an 8-second blip, just so I understand the wording, so it's one of those boards that rotates, or in every 8 seconds a new ad comes up?
Every 8 seconds, a new ad comes up. So it doesn't necessarily rotate physically, but it's a digital
I'm just
billboard.
thinking of those old ones in Vegas that they rotated. There was 3, there was always 3 ads per billboard, right? And then
Yep. No, not those. These are literally computers on a stick, right? They're just digital billboards.
Nice.
Every digital billboard runs on software, and they have 8-second slots. So a full evolution is 64 seconds, a little bit greater than a minute there. And when you come to Blip, you are bidding or reserving a spot to be one of those 8. And so every 8 seconds, the ad changes to something else. Just a new image appears on the screen.
So then thinking about that leaves me another question about competition. Do you filter who's in those 8 seconds or those 8 slots, or does it just whoever's bidding for it?
Yeah, great question. It's whoever's bidding for it. And we don't have any say in this because remember, we don't own these boards. So let me describe maybe for 30 seconds the relationship that we have with sign owners. Sign owners, they have a sales team, normally on average, they'll have a sales team and they'll say, hey, we have 8 slots on this board. Hey, mom and pop store X, mom and pop store Y, or national brand A, whatever. Do you want to rent one of these slots? This is the cost for a year. And they'll go under contract and do that. Well, on average, 25% of every board in the US goes unfilled. And that's why, so that's 2 out of 8 slots unfilled. That's why sometimes you'll see on a billboard, advertise here, your name here. That's a slot that hasn't been sold yet. And so what Blip did was we went to sign owners and we said, hey, you're not making any money on those 2 slots, obviously. We have a bunch of people on our tool trying to get to billboards. What if you just give us access to what's open, and then we'll rifle that demand right to it, and then we'll split the revenue. And so that's what we're doing. The sign owner has ultimate authority on who plays on their board. So if you were to advertise on a board that had an open slot, that board may have other law firms already contracted with it. May not. It may have, a whole host of things. And that brings me to another point that's really important. Probably not a problem in the legal industry, but the board owners also have ultimate say on what plays on the ad in terms of content. So as you can imagine, board owners don't want pornographic images, or some board owners want, CBD type stuff or profanity or things like that. And so they'll be very judicious about what plays on their board. And that has an effect what type of competition you're up against. And there's another side to the competition conversation that's really positive. It's kind of like the Robin Hood aspect of why Blip was founded. In Salt Lake City, there's a shoe company called Kizik, Kizik, and they have like shoelaceless technology. And so the back of the shoe is meant to let your heel slide in thousands of times over the course of its life without damaging the material. And super convenient, super comfortable. Recommend you all check them out, especially if you're on your feet a lot. But Kizik can use, or a company like Kizik, a startup shoe company, they can use Blip to advertise in the same place, the same time as Nike on a fraction of the budget, right? So Blip is allowing someone like Kizik to not be excluded from the party just because they're small and don't have a big budget. It could be a Nike ad that flips, then a Reebok, then Adidas, then Kizik's right on the same board. And that aspect of competition is somewhat leveling the playing field, and we really like that about what we're doing.
Yeah, I can just see some big names. Exactly. So you've taken the inventory that's there that goes, if it flips and it's not sold, it's money gone. You'll never get that back. It's like a hotel the next morning. If you haven't sold that room, it's done. So you've taken that and make it a less expensive opportunity for your clients to get into that inventory. I love that.
Yeah. And, I just saw a metric last week, so I'll share it here, because everyone's got an app in their basement. And sometimes when you hear talks like this, it's hard to contextualize like, okay, how's it really going, man? Is it out of the basement yet? And we surpassed a couple of months ago, 1.4 billion paid flips since,
Wow.
That's a lot of Robin Hood arrows that we're extremely proud of,
That's exciting. 1.8 billion flips.
1.4 billion paid flips. Yeah.
Fantastic. Wow, this is really interesting. If you guys are thinking about, any of the listeners thinking about putting up billboards, this sounds like the way to do it, that you can actually use it in your funnel of marketing. I love that. So RJ, I know that some people might want to reach out to you, and I know you have a special offer for our listeners. Could you tell us how we can reach you and what would be the next steps?
Yeah, you can reach us. We're Blip on LinkedIn, or me personally, RJ at Blip on LinkedIn, the only one there. The offer that you just mentioned is also accessible through a landing page for your listeners specifically. And I think you'll have this go out in your communications, but I'll say it here just in case, offers.blipbillboards.com/podcast. And it's an offer for a 25% match. What that means is, if you create a campaign and you're like, hey, I want to spend $1,000 over a period of time in Houston, for example, since you're coming through this podcast, we will increase the value of that campaign from $1,000 to $1,250 for the same price. And there's no, ceiling or minimum spend for that. It's just a 25% match on whatever your budget is.
Awesome. And I'll make sure that the link to all of that they're in the show notes for you. So that's great. Well, RJ, this has been really a fascinating conversation, and I hope it just continues to get better and the retargeting works really well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Great to be with you. See you around.
Thanks for joining me today for this episode. As we wrap up, I'd love for you to do two things. First, subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. And if you find value here, I'd love it if you would rate it and review it. That really does make a difference in helping other people to discover this podcast. Second, you can connect with me on LinkedIn to keep up with what I'm currently learning and thinking about. And if you're ready to take the next step with a digital strategist to help you grow your law firm, I'd be honored to help you. Just go to lawmarketingzone.com to book a call with me. Stay tuned for our next episode next week. Until then, as always, thanks for listening to Leadership in Law Podcast, and be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss the next episode.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Leadership in Law Podcast. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. There's a whole community of law firm owners out there facing similar challenges and striving for the same success. Head over to our website at lawmarketingzone.com. From there, connect with other listeners, access valuable resources, and stay up to date on the latest episodes. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, keep leading with vision and keep growing your firm.